Hello, well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here this evening, and thanks to everybody that's watching the recording a little bit later. Certainly had a lot of requests for that already. My name is Anand. I'm a professor of communication in the Department of Communication Digital Studies, and I'm also very pleased to be the director of the Center for AI and the Liberal Arts. And that is the organization, the center that we have here at Mary Washington that is working in these areas, bringing in speakers like Dr. Coverstone. Before I get to the introduction of Coverstone, I'd like to introduce, though, the president of the university, Dr. Paino, to make a few remarks.
So I promise I'll be brief because you're not here for me, but it does afford me an opportunity. May you live in interesting times, right? And we are living in interesting times. I actually am excited about the opportunities. Yes, I know there's a lot of concern and anxiety about this moment in time, but there are also a lot of opportunities, and I think we'll hear more about that later this evening. But over dinner, before we came down, I was sitting at a table, and I was looking around that table, and I was thinking about, how fortunate we are as a community to have such talent here, from our alums to our faculty, certainly our students, and then having the opportunity to have special guests to come and enlighten us on an issue that has been on all of our mind. And I did want to draw attention to two individuals who have really made this evening possible, and that's Donna and Steve Gladis, who are sitting down here to my right. Donna is a 1969 graduate. 68, I'm sorry, you just look too young to be 68. I thought it had to be 69. 68 alum of Mary Washington College. And Steve, her husband, they are just such valuable members of this community. They make Mary Washington better, and they're really an example of what people who have been a part of a community for a long time, how they can make such a positive difference. And their continued engagement, their intellectual curiosity, their good humor, they are good people. And we would not have what we are really celebrating here tonight without them. This Center for Artificial Intelligence and the Liberal Arts really is a product of their generosity. It is also a product of incredibly talented faculty who want to be engaged in the issues of the day, and Anand certainly is chief among them. We are so fortunate to have someone like him who is a public intellectual, but also very entrepreneurial, but also interested in what we are all going through. I know whether it's COVID and now artificial intelligence, he has always helped us navigate our way through these challenging transitions. So I want to thank both all of the faculty who are a part of this today and in the future, Anand's leadership, the Gladises. Look forward to learning more tonight. I know that, when you wake up to the news that companies are laying off people by the thousands, and it's being attributed to artificial intelligence, that this is a moment where we all have to take pause and think about what does the future look like, and what is our responsibility to make sure our students are prepared for that future. And that's really what tonight is all about, and it's what this Center for Artificial Intelligence and the Liberal Arts. Mary Washington's very forward-looking. To have a liberal arts institution that is engaged in the issue of artificial intelligence. I can tell you, I've talked to a lot of presidents around the country, and we are leading the way in being engaged in this issue. We're not putting our heads in the sand, knowing that it's going to affect not only today but tomorrow. And if we're going to do our job to prepare our students for that future, we have to be engaged on this topic, and that's what tonight's about. So thank you very much, Anand, for this opportunity, and thank you, Donna and Steve.
Thank you so much for that, President Paino. We appreciate it. I want to second his thanks to Donna and Steve, and very much an honor to be able to welcome you all to the first of what we hope is a long series of lectures that are sponsored through the generous donation from this wonderful family. And this is the Donna and Steve Lecture in AI and Society. And we have a lot of ideas about who we're going to be bringing in to continue this conversation There's a lot more that we need to do, and it's not just about, the donation is incredibly generous, but my thanks to both of them for their emotional support over the years, their guidance, their mentorship. A little over 2 years ago, I gave a Mary talk on AI at that point, and Steve contacted me and said, we need to talk. And I think every couple of weeks or so, we're on another Zoom call or meeting and running workshops and learning from each other and pushing and prodding each other, and it's been fantastic. It has been wonderful to be able to work with him. I appreciate the mentorship, the guidance, and all of the support. So thank you both so much, and thanks for being here. And I want to give you a round of applause for all that you do for UMW. Really appreciate it. Now, for this first lecture, sponsored by the Center, I'm very pleased to welcome somebody who I've admired for a very long time. First, as a very successful college debater when I was first introduced to his work, then as an equally successful college debate coach and high school debate coach, then through his work professionally in education and his leadership in a number of realms. And he was an innovation leader for Metro Nashville Public Schools. He was chair of the education department at Belmont University in education, a senior program officer at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and now he's director of regional partnerships for the National Speech and Debate Association. Throughout all that time, lots of very impressive credentials and wonderful accolades that are well-deserved and been recognized for his work. But what I've always been most impressed by is that anytime I have a conversation with Alan, I learn something, and I'm always blown away by his curiosity. I've been very pleased over the last 2.5, 3 years to work with him as part of a research group to explore how AI is disrupting higher education and K through 12. What is it doing to society? How is it changing our norms, our expectations, and how do we adapt? How do we make sure that our students are ready for an AI world in a way that we aren't sure what it's going to look like, but we need to make sure that they are on fair footing and good ground to be able to be successful in that world. And so I really appreciated Alan being willing to come and join us for this discussion. He has a lot to share. And so let me turn it over to Dr. Alan Coverstone to talk to us about reclaiming human intelligence in the age of AI, plural futures for education and society.
Well, thanks, Anand. I appreciate it. Thank you, President Paino, for opening your doors and for the vision and foresight that you've demonstrated in your support for the center. It's really remarkable, and as you say, you are on the leading edge. And I want to take kind of personal privilege plus thanks for my close friend, Provost O'Donnell, for the opportunity to speak today as well, and for your leadership and support in shaping this center, as well as UMW's thoughtful response to these opportunities and challenges. Those who know Provost O'Donnell, as I do, understand his steadiness, insight, and quiet generosity, and he brings that to every endeavor. It's a privilege to see those same qualities shaping this institution, and I'm deeply grateful for his friendship, his vision, and the care with which he leads. I also like to thank Donna and Steve Gladis for their generous support, and just for welcoming me this afternoon. I've thoroughly enjoyed the opportunity to get to talk with you and listen to your experience and expertise and your perspective, and I'm richer as a result, so thank you. The ideas in this lecture would not be possible without the significant contributions of my friends and colleagues, all of them, but certainly among them, chief among them, Stefan Bouchard, John Hines, Devin Gonier, and Dr. Anand Rao. That's our research group, and our shared exchange of ideas since the release of ChatGPT has been among the most enriching of my career. And opportunities to test and share these ideas just wouldn't be possible without all of them. But in particular, thank you, Dr. Rao, for your vision and intentionality and for creating the space for learning that the Center for AI and the Liberal Arts provides. And finally, I'd like to thank all the students of AI and Society. Shout out. You're not just the reason for this work, you're the ones who will carry it forward. So get ready. I've spent my entire life in and around schools, and one thing has become increasingly clear. What we call intelligence in school is only a fraction of what humans are capable of. We've learned to measure what we can, and over time we've let those measurements define what counts. Logic, memory, language, these are important. They're very important, but they're not the whole story. Human intelligence is much broader than that. It's relational, intuitive, embodied, and moral. It shows up in silence as often as it shows up in speech. It shows up in collaboration as often as it does in calculation and computation. Human intelligence is much broader and more pluralistic than what we were taught in schools. And when we narrow our definition of human intelligence, we don't just miseducate our students, we really misrepresent what it means to be human. What's the difference? Well, the difference shows up in everyday decisions, both big and small, especially when the kind of thinking that we reward in school, the kind of thinking that gets you an A, the right answer, the answer that gets you acknowledged as smart, or dare I say intelligent, when those definitions don't quite hold up in the real world. So a small city hired a top consulting firm to recommend infrastructure upgrades. One item on the list was curb ramps for wheelchair access around the city. The firm's artificial intelligence was trained on traffic, accidents, elevation, and budgets, and they proposed 14 curb cut ramps at the busiest intersections. The plan was clean, confident, data-driven, quick slideshow, and it was about to be approved by the commissioners. Work smarter, not harder, they said. But one commissioner, named Maya, a civil engineer, asked to delay approval for a week. And during that week, she walked the neighborhoods and listened, not only to the wheelchair users, but also to elders with walkers, kids on bikes, and parents with strollers. And she asked where life actually got stuck. She came back with some revisions to the plan. She kept 10 of the original sites, but moved 4 of them to quieter corners and daily choke points that the data had ignored. Some objected, why would you override the model? This is the right plan. It's looking at way more data than you could. But eventually the board acquiesced and adopted her changes. A year later, usage on Maya's 4 added ramps was 3 times higher than the 4 they replaced, not just because they were accessible, but because they were where the people actually lived and had their daily lives. The consultant's artificial intelligence found the intersections, but Maya found the humans. The AI wasn't wrong. By its own criteria, things like throughput, risk, efficiency, it was perfectly right. Maya changed the criteria, though. She widened the goal from intersections with the most cars to intersections with the most life. A plural intelligence that valued empathy, narrative, spatial nuance, and lived experience alongside computation. Our schools and our economy, by contrast, prize the algorithms kind of intelligence. We test for it, we rank by it, and now we build machines to simulate it and risk forgetting that the deepest community problems aren't really solved by efficiency alone. Now, a frequently repeated question in education today, and my experience being primarily in K-12 education, I hear it all the time, is this: should students use artificial intelligence like ChatGPT? But I don't really think the binary choice, use or not use, is exactly the right question. Maybe instead we should be asking, what kinds of thinking and ways of knowing still matter when a machine can imitate reasoning so fluently that we can easily mistake computation for comprehension? We call it artificial intelligence, and we assume we know what intelligence is, and the ways that this artificial intelligence mimics our human intelligence. But the disruption that AI is creating isn't that it's replacing human intelligence, it's that we have long ago collapsed a symphony of human intelligences into a single melody. Only now, the computers play it louder and better than we do. Here's another story. Johann Sebastian Bach, one of history's great composers, loved the keyboard above all the other instruments: organs, harpsichords, clavichord, piano. But in his compositions, he still used other instruments, and he saw values across all of those instruments. But imagine if he didn't. Imagine if he decided everyone should play the keyboards. What would he do? He'd start a school for organists, right? Mastery of the counterpoint and pedal techniques would become the highest mark of musical intellect. At first, it's exhilarating because the organ is a fantastic and magnificent instrument, precise and grand. But soon the conservatory begins to judge every musician by how well they imitate the organ. Flautists and singers are told that their phrasing isn't quite organic enough. Drummers are praised for their enthusiasm, but dismissed as untrained. And even when new keyboard instruments appear, harpsichords, fortepiano, the logic remains. Every student must sit at a keyboard, every composition must obey the same grammar. The music itself is still diverse, but everything orbits around the same narrow idea of keyboard music, until eventually we drop the word keyboard and we just call it music. This, I think, is what we've done with intelligence. Human intelligence is an orchestra, but we've built a conservatory for a single family of instruments, particularly in our K-12 schools. The linguistic and logical pieces of human intelligence are the ones that center everything. We create endless variations, verbal reasoning, mathematical modeling, algorithmic optimization. They're all exquisite, but they're all within the same narrow range of sound, or in this case, intelligence. We reward those who play it best. We call it rigorous. We call it academic. We call it intelligence. But what it really is key-bound. It's a single cultural octave mistaken for the symphony of the mind. So now we've built machines, artificial intelligences, that can play those keyboards faster, longer, and more precisely than any of us individually. They're virtuosos at measurement. They perfect the art of the narrow intelligence. But what happens to the rest of the human music, the rhythms, the voices, improvisation, living breath of thought, when we forget that intelligence was never meant to be confined to a single instrument in the first place? Reclaiming human intelligence doesn't mean silencing the keyboard. Far from it. It means remembering the orchestra. It means hearing again the drums, the wind, the human voice, and all the other instruments that make thought a living art. For over a century, education has equated intelligence. Am I one behind? I am, aren't I? Yeah. For over a century, education has equated intelligence with what could be measured. IQ scores, standardized tests, rubrics, data dashboards. We built our system, we built our curricula, and we built our technologies around what's measurable, a measurable analytical slice of cognition. That the part that can be observed and scored and optimized, that's what we build around. And now we've built machines that perform that better, faster, and at virtually infinite scale. The rise of generative AI doesn't disrupt this definition, it exposes it. AI hasn't surpassed human intelligence, it's perfected the narrow intelligence designed to replicate, that it was designed to replicate in the first place. And if we're willing to look closely, I think AI also reveals everything that's left out. So what AI illuminates most clearly is the fragility of a century-old assumption that intelligence can be reduced to pattern recognition, prediction, and probability, and that when we define intelligence only as what can be counted, we exclude other forms of knowing that make us human. Things like creativity, moral reasoning, empathy, imagination, curiosity, and wonder. So what then is the purpose of education in the age of AI? It's not to compete with the machines, but to reclaim the full range of human intelligences, to design schools and universities that cultivate the many ways that humans know, create, and make meaning together. Because if we continue to define learning by what can be computed and measured, using the methods that we have come to call objective, we'll keep building systems that teach students to mimic machines, when what the world needs are people who can think with the machines and with each other in a plural cacophony of human intelligence, where the artificial ways of knowing are treated as just one among many in a pluralistic and collaborative effort to make meaning and find useful or true knowledge that aligns with the core assumption of liberal arts education in the first place. That if we engage multiple ways of knowing in conversation, dialogue, and debate, we can actually liberate ourselves from the tyranny of our physical and social constraints to create the individual and shared agency to reshape those worlds to promote our individual and collective thriving. Before we can reclaim human intelligence, however, we have to ask a question that both schools and AI engineers too often are taking for granted. What is intelligence? When Howard Gardner published Frames of Mind in 1983, he challenged a century of psychometric orthodoxy. He defined an intelligence as, you might want to take notes here. This is a hard part of the lecture. A biopsychological potential to process information that can be activated within a cultural setting to solve problems or create products that are valued in one or more cultures. So that definition expanded the concept of intelligence 3 ways. It posited that intelligence was biological. Intelligence lives in bodies and brains. Second, it was cultural. It develops within communities through language, art, ritual, and relationships. And it's purposeful. It shows itself in solving, creating, and contributing. Gardner proposed that humans actually possess multiple intelligences, distinct yet interconnected ways of knowing and creating. Among them, linguistic and logical mathematical, which we're most familiar with and we train the most, but also spatial, bodily kinesthetic, musical, interpersonal, and intrapersonal, as well as naturalistic ways of knowing. And later he added moral or existential intelligence, which speaks to our capacity to seek meaning and purpose. His theory wasn't about learning styles or self-esteem as it's often portrayed. It was a philosophical and psychological claim that intelligence is not actually a hierarchy, but an ecosystem, a symphony of ways of knowing that humans use to make sense of their world. Every person carries all of these multiple intelligences in different proportions and at different levels of development, drawing on some more than others depending on the context. Schools, however, are very good at cueing and rewarding only a narrow range, usually our linguistic and our logical reasoning. When a student takes the SAT, for example, interpersonal intelligence would clearly help. I mean, it's smart, after all, if you don't know the answer, to ask somebody else for help. But in that context, that would be called cheating. Our definitions of smart and struggling are really just definitions of what kind of intelligence we're willing to recognize in a given point in time. We've built systems, educational, economic, and social, that privilege logical deductive reasoning while discounting much of the rest. Context matters. Next Friday night, Laura and I will be rewarding the Jerry Douglas Band by purchasing tickets to see their musical intelligence on full display, accompanied by our close friend, Christian Settlemeyer. In a lab, on the contrary, we might value analytical intelligence and reward that accordingly. But in life, all of these intelligences are around us and part of us all the time. We just haven't developed them as much in our schools. Coding and computation may extend our capacities, but they cannot replicate the full depth of interpersonal or intrapersonal knowing, things like empathy and judgment and self-reflection. These human intelligences are not easily modeled because we've spent little time designing education to even really understand them or cultivate them. And computers were never really designed to capture them in the first place, nor were computers developed by them, when in the contrary, computers and artificial intelligence were developed by people well-schooled in logical deduction and linguistic representation. To reclaim human intelligence, then, I believe we must rediscover this plurality and build systems in schools that develop the full orchestra of the mind, not just the instruments easiest to measure. Critics sometimes argue that Gardner's intelligences are really just skills or talents, not distinct mental faculties or capabilities. But that critique kind of misses the point. Gardner never really claimed that they were isolated brain modules. He described intelligences as distinct but interacting ways of knowing. They're biopsychological potentials that are shaped and activated within a certain culture or context. A skill can be taught and refined through repetition and feedback, but an intelligence must be developed through experience, through reflection, and through challenges. Skills perfect performance. Intelligences expand perception. When one way of knowing falls, we have to reach for another. emotional, spatial, moral, interpersonal, and in that reach we grow and we become more intelligent. This is how minds evolve, not by perfecting a single capability, but by engaging friction between multiple ones. Standardized tests can capture performance, but not really growth. Rubrics can measure precision, but not wonder. We can score the right answer, but not the enlargement of the mind it took to get there. And that's the tragedy of modern education and the threat of AI in education. And the quiet danger of artificial intelligence looms because of that specifically. Both are built on the same reduction, that belief in the belief that intelligence is just a single function to be optimized rather than a living system to be cultivated. And when we treat intelligence as singular and measurable, we don't just misjudge students, we misunderstand humanity. At its core, I think artificial intelligence represents the refinement and even the perfection of this narrow band of human intelligence. And I call it narrow, but don't think it's unimportant or not powerful. It's incredibly important, it's incredibly powerful. The problem is not developing linguistic representation and logical deduction forms of intelligence. The problem is developing them to the exclusion of others. So we still pay people with unusually strong musical intelligence to perform in our local philharmonic. There's value for that. We still have the sense that interpretation, emotion, and creative synthesis in art holds value. Even if we confine that reward to narrow occupations and still compensate persons in those fields less than the professions built on argument and analysis as well as computation, we still think there's value, but we marginalize it. When computers exercise artificial intelligence, they're excelling at pattern recognition, prediction, and probabilistic reasoning, the very forms of cognition that our schools have long privileged. So in many ways, artificial intelligence represents the triumph of exactly what we've been trying to do in our schools for over a century. We call this kind of thinking academic, but it's really just one octave of the full human symphony. AI models like ChatGPT operate almost entirely within the linguistic and logical mathematical domains, analyzing vast data sets and identifying patterns, generating statistically coherent responses. And that's impressive and useful, but it's also limited. Or stated differently, human intelligence is just much more vast. Human intelligence in its full diversity is interpretive, creative, embodied, and moral. It includes the analytic, syntactic, and deductive intelligence that AI now masters. But when humans use those same capacities, there's more happening than just computation. We're also feeling, judging, imagining, and empathizing even as we reason. Our cognition is saturated with ever-shifting context, physical, emotional, ethical, relational. And AI can process text, but it can't experience meaning. It can mimic reasoning, but it cannot wrestle with the actual uncertainty that we do. The times when logic can't really explain, let alone resolve, the problems we confront or the goals we aspire to. It can generate answers, but it can't live within the tension of not knowing. That's why it hallucinates. For artificial intelligence, the answer is really everything. That's what makes most sense at this moment in history. And this moment in history is both disruptive and revelatory. The advent of generative AI shows us not what the machines can do so much, but what we've neglected to honor in ourselves and worse, failed to develop in our schools. If we look closely, the arrival of artificial intelligence doesn't diminish human intelligence at all. It actually illuminates its richness. It reveals how impoverished our system of schooling has been, how long we've trained students to imitate machines rather than develop the full spectrum of intelligences that make them human. So the challenge now is not how to protect education from AI, it's how to rebuild education so that it does what AI really can't, which is cultivate wisdom, cultivate empathy, creativity, and the capacity to think and relate across differences. We have to do this together. And if we do that, likely we'll discover that there are tons of other forms of human intelligence that we haven't yet begun to understand. If we look for them and develop them, the challenge for us is to reclaim human intelligence. So if human intelligence is truly plural, what follows? How do we design education, universities, technologies, everything that develops the full range of human capacities rather than narrowing them? I think the first step is to see the system clearly. For over a century, schools and assessments have treated linguistic and logical reasoning as the whole of intelligence because those are easy to measure, there's value attached, albeit a little bit circular in its reasoning. We built test scores to rank students, credentials to rank colleges, and productivity metrics to rank workers. But the machinery that delivered access, accountability, and economic growth also brings some blind spots. We've optimized education for efficiency, and in so doing, trained students to perform intelligence rather than cultivate, develop it. The result is a generation fluent in rule following, optimization, and performance, exactly the kinds of thinking that machines now automate with ease. So AI isn't breaking our education system, it's revealing what we kind of broke a while ago, our failure to cultivate the full plural spectrum of human intelligences. If you want to see pluralistic intelligence in action, spend a Saturday at a speech and debate tournament. In every round, students are drawing on the full orchestra of the mind, linguistic skill to craft arguments, logical reasoning to structure them, interpersonal intelligence to read the room, react to the judge, and work with a colleague, interpersonal awareness to manage emotion, intrapersonal awareness to manage emotion, and moral imagination to decide what's even worth defending. Real debate isn't combative, it's structured humility. Students listen before they refute, understand before they argue, and adapt when new evidence challenges what they thought they already knew. They learn that disagreement isn't danger, it's data. And the truth doesn't belong to any one voice, but emerges from a conversation among many. This is what pluralistic education looks like. If we can teach students to argue well, we can teach societies to think well, to value one another and build communities where everyone's intelligence contributes to our shared thriving. The uncomfortable truth is that both our education systems and our AI systems share the same design flaw. They privilege conformity and efficiency over diversity and reflection. Both were built to produce consistent outcomes, and they do. Both reward replication over imagination. And both marginalize and undervalue ways of knowing that don't fit neatly into a data set or a rubric. This is not just an educational challenge, it's a societal and a civic one. When our technologies and our institutions define intelligence too narrowly, we exclude voices and perspectives that we need most to bring into the conversation in order for all of us to navigate the change we're facing and the uncertainty of the future world. So that's why pluralism can't be a luxury. I believe pluralism has to be a design principle for education, for AI, and for our democracy and our economy. So why does this matter in K-12 education? Well, for K-12 schools, the task is not just to use AI responsibly or worse, to use AI to do what schools are designed to do now, but more efficiently. We've got to rebuild our learning environments in our schools around intelligence diversity and cultivating multiple ways of knowing in groups and conversations that are brought to bear on single problem solving. That means shifting assessments from grading just correctness to evaluating how students think. And hear me plainly, correctness matters. We can grade correctness. But we also have to test and grade and analyze and learn to develop the other faculties that allow us to arrive at correct solutions because we, unlike the computers, don't take a single path. Let AI serve as a learning partner. Let it be a generator of ideas that students then have to question, refine, and challenge together, turning it from an answer machine into a strong tool of one kind among many kinds of intelligence. Let's design our classrooms to blend arts with science, ethics with coding, storytelling with statistics, so that students learn to move fluidly across the disciplines and utilize different of their multiple intelligences so that they're developed in the process. And while curricular changes that this fully human perspective requires can get locked in pitched battles, making the need for reform very difficult, the instructional approaches that are needed for this can already be found in some classrooms and at those Saturday morning debate tournaments. And we can commit now to prepare the next generation of teachers, not simply to deliver knowledge, but to cultivate diverse intelligences and coach growth across the many different intelligences that humans bring to the classroom. The practical constraint on reform, of course, is that schools are under immense pressure to produce measurable results, and our economic structures reward the results that come from that narrow computational intelligence highly. But the opportunity, even within the current constraints, is that AI can now handle the measurable tasks, freeing teachers to focus on the immeasurable ones, curiosity, intelligence, wonder, but if we're willing to take it on. So what does this mean for higher education, especially the liberal arts? Too often the liberal arts have been cast as some kind of human counterweight to technical education, as though logic and ethics or reason, imagination belong to separate species altogether. But in the age of artificial intelligence, that artificial distinction collapses. The liberal arts are not peripheral to the future of AI. They are the critical infrastructure for a trustworthy, humane, and pluralistic intelligence ecosystem. The liberal arts cultivate the very capacities that no algorithm can replace: ethical reasoning, narrative understanding, creative synthesis, moral imagination, and empathy. They're not ornamental soft skills. They're the connective tissue of any society that seeks to align intelligence with human flourishing. If we want AI that's not merely powerful, but also responsible, we need ethicists, linguists, historians, artists, and philosophers in the room where the code is written. Because if intelligence diversity is missing from those rooms, truth and justice will be too. This is where centers like this one, the Center for AI and the Liberal Arts at University of Mary Washington, can play a transformative role. They can help universities to reclaim their civic purpose and redefine it for a future that lies ahead, to serve as model sites of epistemic pluralism built on intelligence diversity, spaces where different ways of knowing engage one another rigorously, respectfully, and continuously. The challenge is not to add one more interdisciplinary seminar, nor is it to replace one narrow orthodoxy with a different one. The challenge and the opportunity, I believe, is to embed pluralism into the architecture of higher education itself. The following are my ideas, not necessarily endorsed by my employer or by the center, and I offer them with humility and hope that they will inspire more and different ideas in everyone here. As a believer in intelligence diversity, I know I only have one slice and one set of perspectives, and I only know so much. I couldn't do anything else but offer them in humility and ask you to join the conversation. And so I think universities should make pluralism a method, not just a value. Treat disagreement, dialogue, and deliberation as the pedagogy in every discipline, from computer science to design to literature, so that students learn to reason across perspectives and access and develop multiple intelligences, not just within silos or disciplinary ways of knowing. Second, institutionalize co-design across departments and disciplines. Ensure that any new AI-related program or research initiative includes both technical and humanistic faculty in its conception, governance, and evaluation. Third, revalue integrative forms of intelligence. Reward scholarship and teaching that bridges the analytical, ethical, and imaginative insights, and revise hiring and promotion systems to reflect that these are not ancillary, but essential to the university's mission. Fourth, prepare graduates for citizenship that is epistemically plural. Design curricula that helps students recognize and respect diverse intelligences in themselves and others, human and artificial, and equip them to deliberate ethically and collaboratively about their coexistence. If we do this, I think we can unlock a new century of inquiry. We'll ask different questions that we've not yet imagined and solve problems that we've not yet recognized. Most importantly, we'll improve life in our community, especially for millions whose experiences in the current system are too often marginalized, devalued, and ignored because they're not thought smart. When we begin to acknowledge and cultivate intelligence diversity, we may one day look back and say, AI didn't diminish our liberal arts. It showed us how to reclaim their importance and their power. If we can no longer outcalculate our machines, then maybe the goal shouldn't be competition. Maybe the goal should be co-intelligence, humans and AI learning together to build a richer, more plural understanding of the world, recognizing that we bring plenty to bear in that conversation as humans that artificial intelligence may mimic, but can never genuinely adopt. Imagine a classroom where AI generates opposing arguments and students evaluate, refine, and improve them, or a seminar where students use AI to explore the same questions through linguistic, ethical, and emotional lenses, and then debate the differences. In those settings, AI and other humans become the foils that sharpen our human thought, and AI becomes a tool that also reveals what only humans can do, and that is to connect judgment to meaning and meaning to value. Pluralism gives this partnership its structure. Like a debate round, the rules remain: evidence, logic, turn-taking, switching sides, but within them lies infinite space for creativity and empathy and the dynamic interplay of multiple intelligences. I think that's what a truly pluralistic education looks like. So, whoops. Well, if we take this seriously, the question isn't how do we regulate AI? It's how do we design education for a world where intelligence is plural, human and machine, diverse and interdependent. And that means we will reclaim intelligence as plural, we'll stop ranking minds by a single metric, and teach and assess through multiple intelligences. We'll design education for co-intelligence, not competition, helping students to work with AI, questioning, steering, and interpreting through distinctly human capacities. We will embed debate and deliberation everywhere, make every classroom a space for argumentation, empathy, and collaborative and contingent truth-seeking, build pluralism into design and policy from K-12 standards to university governance and AI research, ensure multiple intelligences and cultures shape what we build, and reclaim the liberal arts as humanity's R&D lab. That's where we rediscover creativity and ethics as well as meaning and value. These are intelligences that machines cannot capture. So the question I'm asked most is, are you hopeful? And the honest answer is yes, but not because of the technology. It's because of the young people. Every time I watch young people interact, whether it's a debate round or a maker lab or a community project, an after-school club, an athletic team, the AI and society class, or even the lunchroom, I'm really reminded that intelligence wants to be plural. It wants to connect and create and make meaning together. Our narrowing of intelligence made it competitive and drove us apart, and makes all of this all or nothing. And in fact, the all or nothing, right versus wrong polarization in our society today may only be possible because of that, and may be inevitable because of that. So our task as educators and citizens is to build systems worthy of the richness of our plural human intelligence. If we do that, then AI won't diminish us. It will just remind us who we are and how vast and varied human intelligence actually is. So our task is not to outthink the machines, but to outhuman them, to build futures where technology and wisdom grow together. And that, I think, is how we can reclaim intelligence in the age of AI. Thank you.
Alan, thank you so much for that. We do have some time for some questions, and we'll have the microphone coming around. I want to ask the first one, and this is something that's often a criticism of advocating this pluralistic model where everyone has their own perspective. Doesn't that just result in a form of relativism where it just kind of undermines and polarizes us further if we push that? If we just kind of tell everybody they have their own perspective, they're allowed to develop it in their own ways, how do we counter that, or how do we find the right balance?
Yeah, I think it's kind of the opposite, actually, because I think what I'm suggesting is that we all have different perspectives and experiences and different and kind of the polarization that we see. I think it's a reflection of that sort of ranking of who's smart and who's not, forcing us to compete individually against one another. So my suggestion is, especially in a world where the data sets that AI can manage are so huge that we could never do that individually ourselves, that we need to bring as many human minds into our learning and our understanding and development as possible. I'm not really kidding about interpersonal intelligence being critical. And the SAT not allowing interpersonal intelligence as a way to find answers is probably more an indictment of the SAT than it is an indictment of multiple intelligences. And so to fashion schools that do that, we're not talking about relativism. We're talking about group understanding and group learning that brings multiple intelligences to the situation and allows us to reach decisions that are useful in our groups. We recognize that this whole idea that we're going to find the absolute true right answer and then that's going to be the end of it isn't real. And it's not good for human society to go in that direction either. So I really think it's not relativism. I think we have more relativism by kind of leaning on our own devices, especially as the machines get bigger and bigger.
Excellent, thank you for that. Questions? Yeah.
Hello, Professor. I have a question. Do you think that Montessori schooling is in the right direction of like pluralism?
Short answer, yes. I have kids who went to Montessori schools, so I'm a little biased there. But yeah, I mean, I think it is. I think those kinds of shared discovery, especially when it can be across different humans in the room, when they work together, it's really powerful. So yeah, short answer, yes. We could talk about that at length. I'll tell you this story. When my son was in Montessori school, he was in a class of 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. And just that fact right there meant that he had a lot of different experiences that were brought to bear in the classroom. And, you know, the simple story is he came home one day and he said, you know, Meredith can read. You know, so now he wants to read. And that collaboration and that shared inspiration is different than this. Meredith can read, why can't you? Right? Meredith is smart, maybe you're not. Which is what the ranking of intelligence, I think, creates much more. So yeah, I'm a big fan.
That was a really insightful, wonderful lecture. All the things that you talked about is reclaiming this intelligence. It was really amazing for the first time I'm listening to it. So thank you very much for the lecture. My question is particularly on co-intelligence and making AI your learning partner. Now, when I make AI my learning partner to develop the plural intelligences that you're talking about, which we humans have and AI machines don't, like ethics, like feelings, like empathy and creativity, in order to develop those intelligences, if I'm using AI as my partner, learning partner, isn't there an ethical risk that AI will still give me the answers, even how I should feel, how I can empathize with others? And I'm, in short, becoming a slave to AI's answers. So isn't it atrophying the intelligences and human faculties that we want to cultivate if AI is my co-intelligence partner?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think there are a couple of thoughts that I have, but I think it's an answer that, you know, maybe we all could contribute to. I mean, I think what I'm describing is that it's not just me in my room coming to conclusions that work for me, right? Because interpersonal intelligence is an intelligence that we need to develop, right? And so we need to be interacting with one another. But intrapersonally, yeah, we could get some advice from artificial intelligence. They could tell us how to approach things. It could tell us how to approach things. And, you know, then we have to test those in dialogue and discussion with other humans who may also be using those things, but testing them out in practice. It's not that I think the analytical deductive powers of the artificial intelligence are meaningless or useless, nor is it that I think, but I would resist the idea that they are absolute truth or that they represent the best we can know. They represent one way of knowing. And if we think about it as co-intelligence, I'm thinking about flattening the intelligences by actually contributing and to the development of the human intelligences beyond those that AI can replicate. So I think it's the dialogue, it's the discussion, it's the interaction, it's the testing in context, because I think the truth, look, you cannot point to anything and say, that's absolutely true, I know it's true. And even if you do know it's true, even if you were in the room and took the video, If there's somebody who disagrees with the position you're trying to promote from that video, they'll just say, well, it's AI, right? And confirmation bias leads us to separate and polarize. And I think that's where we're missing it. We need to develop contingent, useful truths. And by doing that, it doesn't mean we all think alike. It certainly doesn't mean we all think differently in some relativistic way. But we find truths that enable us to work together as humans. And most of our human intelligences are about working together with one another, learning from the environment and learning from each other in order to develop. And so I'm really imagining a world where we emphasize that a lot more, and we will see those other intelligences develop more, and then it will make a little more sense how it can be co-intelligence with the machines. That's how I'm thinking about it, but I'm just getting started.
Hey, I really enjoyed your view on plurality. I was homeschooled, and so a lot of these ideas about favoring other forms of intelligences are ways that I was raised, and I connect a lot to this. And so I wonder, how do you plan on protecting that analytical skill still? You can build all these other ones, but if we outsource that, it very well may disappear into the void of technology. We can remove it, but then when the Wi-Fi goes out, how do I still predict what's going to happen when I have this conversation?
Yeah, I still definitely think we need to teach literacy and numeracy. I think those skills are critically important, and they give you the ability to conceptualize, to ask prompts that are useful, to get a sort of initial idea of whether you even think it rings true, what you're hearing from the machines. And then I think we need to broaden our individual intelligence by working with others. So, where we miss in society is we figure it out, and then we just say, well, I've figured it out. But we have to continually learn and grow and develop, and that's what it means to develop our intelligences. So I do think we need to learn those skills, and I think that what you're describing is the path we're on. And if we don't try to develop other human capacities, then that's what will happen. We have the analytical tools, it's more powerful. Why would I mean, that was the example at the beginning, the curb cut. Why wouldn't you listen to the algorithm? It's analyzed much more data than you could, but it hadn't analyzed the significant data. And we can have a discussion about whether that's significant only if we think that humans are something more than just our budgetary efficiency in making decisions that spend resources at the busiest corners. So I think we're headed in that direction, and I want to revive conversation, dialogue, and sort of human intelligences precisely because we make decisions based on a lot more than just those analytical skills.
I think we have time for just a couple more questions. Caitlin, go ahead and grab one.
First off, thank you so much for coming. Yeah, I really attached your story about Maya and the human factor of just looking at things that maybe AI can't take, in fact. That's from a wheelchair user, and the whole time I was just thinking universal design and education, like reaching every student, all types of intelligence. What kind of perspectives have you heard from students, or maybe people with disabilities, people who are on the spectrum, who are blind, who are deaf?
Well, I mean, I think there are some interesting uses that are possible of artificial intelligence to assist in some of those ways, with some of the needs that students that you describe have. But I think the way we apply them is, in this sort of model of like there's one way of knowing, and if your way of knowing doesn't quite line up with that, then we'll bring some technology in to fix you and help you. And then in the end, it's like, well, it was better, but there's still, and that's the marginalization that I'm talking about. And so, I want to see group projects that involve all the students with whatever their skills and backgrounds and needs are, working together to solve authentic problems. I just think we should spend most of our time in school doing that kind of thing. As far as perspectives I've heard, I mean, I don't have any stories to hand to share with you about that, other than, I think the interventions are useful. and helpful. And, you know, speaking for myself, I have a lot of jumbled ideas in my head, and the technology really helps me to get the ideas out and to kind of organize, but I do it dialogically. It's my ideas, and I'm going to develop them, and I'm using this tool to do that. And I think the human collaboration that I'm talking about really means that we'll all do a lot of that much better. And that will change our relationship with the artificial intelligence as well, because we'll be using it as a co-intelligence tool rather than something that we look to for the right answers. But I think that is an incredibly important question, and one that, you know, I fear kind of doing the same thing more efficiently with new technologies in our schools is not really going to help. It may help, but it's not going to solve the problem I've identified of marginalization. Thanks.
Hi, thank you for the speech. My question is, how far do you think AI should be integrated into education?
Well, again, I mean, I think that's not exactly the question that I would ask, because you know, what I'm suggesting is not that we need to slow it down or stop it. It's out there, it's a tool. Like, I mean, I think phone bans, let's think about that for just a second. Banning phone in school, that's great. You know, everybody's excited about it because the students pay attention and they're more engaged and they have dialogue and discussion. Those are all powerful things, but I'm still looking for the phone ban outside of school. I'd love it. I'll sign up for it. But it's not there, right? So I think the same thing is true in terms of artificial intelligence. And so I think it's important not to really look at it as something that we should like have limits on, but rather that we should use it toward the idea of developing all of our intelligences. And so the integration would be secondary to the problem. I'd develop an authentic problem, the students would work around that, they would utilize AI in that context, and they would press one another about its utility, whether it's answering the questions that they want it to, whether it gives the meaning that they want it to, and they would decide how far AI should be integrated into the project. Because I think that's what we all have to do once we leave school. And we have to train students to have the agency that they need to shape the communities of the future. So we need to do that in school as well.
I think we have time for one more question. I thought I saw a hand over here. Thanks.
Oh, it's actually me. Okay. Hello, Professor. Awesome speech.
Thank you.
My question is, in terms of AI Society, the class that you teach, how do you think you're using your presentation in how you're teaching us?
Well, I hope we are. I mean, I think that's a great question, and I think you should test us on that. You should challenge us on that. You know, I hope we're having conversations and discussions. I hope the debates are encouraging people to think about different topics, and I hope that things like the pitch project. I mean, I think it's almost. I think it's just that the pitch project is really an example of this. You are going to come up with a problem that matters to you. You're then going to pitch that problem to your classmates, and as a group, you'll decide which problems we're going to take on. You'll form groups around those problems, and you'll develop solutions together, and you'll pitch those solutions. I think those are both authentic kind of real-world agency skills and exactly what I'm talking about, because in the process, you can put it into AI, dear AI, please tell me what my problem should be for AI in society, and there'll be a problem, but you're still going to, even if you do that, I don't care. Because you'll still have to make that problem your own. You'll have to develop why it matters to you, and you've got to pitch it to your classmates who didn't put the same thing into the algorithm. They got a different problem, and they've got interests as well, right? And so our multiple interests, our different perspectives, and our different intelligences come together to learn and grow and make decisions about that project. So I think we're trying to do what we're doing, you know, what we're suggesting here, but you have to hold us accountable for that. I very much want your feedback about where we're getting it right and where we're getting it wrong. Because look, I mean, we haven't known artificial intelligence any longer than any of you. And we're developing for the future together.
I love that question. Hold the faculty to account, right? How well if we're
It's easy for me to say since, right. I'm going home later.
Maybe that's the question we need to add to the faculty evaluation at the end of the semester. That's fantastic. I love it. There are a lot of other questions, a lot of other discussions to have. Luckily, we have a reception right next door with some food and drink and give you a chance to interact a little more. Ask Dr. Coverstone some more questions. Let him know what you think about some of these ideas and continue this conversation. Join me in thanking Dr. Coverstone again for his wonderful talk.
Thank you.